Hey guys, my name is Adam Schultze, originally from New Orleans, Louisiana, active duty Navy. I've been stationed here in Millington, Tennessee for almost 2 years now. Been active duty for a little over 14 years. Got into the woodworking hobby back in 2014, right before I married my wife, and got into it out of a necessity. I was broke, and it was Christmas time, and I needed to make something. Needed to get her something for Christmas, and so I ended up making her just a plaque. It was a really simple project, and I really liked doing it. And I was like, let's see where we can take this. And then in 2017, I got flown off deployment to have back surgery. They told me at that time that I wasn't allowed to lift more than 10 pounds, and I was like, I still need to make sawdust. And so I had been watching a bunch of videos on YouTube about wood turning, and was just mesmerized by it, and stumbled across a lathe for sale for 150 bucks, and I couldn't pass it up. So I bought that lathe and started turning pins, and fast forward, here we are in 2020, and we're making segmented bowls now. And that's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Today we have, we're going to do a small walnut bowl, just going over the basics of the cutting the segments, gluing up the rings, to stacking the rings, and eventually making its way onto the lathe to turn. So what I've already got started is just the very base of the bowl. Now, segmented bowls versus bowls from a solid bowl blank. Bowls from a solid bowl blank, they are going to warp. You are going to get an oblong shape just because of the grain orientation and how you have face grain next to end grain, and the wood movement, it's going to pull, and it's going to expand and contract, and you're no longer going to end up with a round bowl. So with segmented bowls, you have all face grain all the way around, and so it will stay round. It's going to move, it's going to expand and contract in a uniform manner all throughout its life and stay round. So one of the things that one of the challenges with segmented bowls is the bottom. No matter how hard I've tried, I have never been able to successfully get all the segments to marry up together at the bottom to make a perfect solid bottom. There's always just the slightest gap, and some turners will drill a hole through the middle and plug it with a dowel or something to give you a solid bottom. Well, today we're going to do what's called a floating bottom. And a floating bottom is a segmented ring with a disc in the middle, and that's actually what I have on the lathe right here, is the floating bottom, and we'll get to that here shortly. But the way the floating bottom works is I've already turned out a recess into the second ring, and we're going to stick the bottom into this recess, and we're going to glue it in, but we're not going to glue it up all the way around. We're only going to glue it up along the grain, and that's to allow the wood to expand and contract with minimal risk of delamination along your seams. So with that, let's go ahead and head over to the table saw, and let's start cutting some segments. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take some walnut that I've already mildly prepped. Today we're going to do an 8-segment ring. Now, I personally use a program to make these bowls. I use a program called Woodturner Pro, and it spits out a cut list and tell me how thick I've designed the board, And the most important number on this page is the edge length. Now there's some terminology in segmented turning that I'm going to use that I want to kind of explain real quick. When I talk about board thickness, I'm referring to the ring height. So how thick, how tall that ring actually is. Then I'm going to talk about edge length, and that is going to be the long part of the segment. And then the width. The width is how thick the ring is from outside to inside. So with this build, again, this is a very basic build. We're gonna just make a very basic bowl. So for starters, the very first thing I do when I prepare a segmented bowl is I need to adjust my miter fence for the cut. Now there are multiple ways to skin a cat. In this case, there are multiple ways to cut the pieces. There are some people who will use a Ouija sled that they made, which is a very popular way to do it. I just do it using a miter fence and a table saw, and that's it. So in order to figure out the math on what your miter angle is, first you need to know how many segments you want. In this case, like I said, we're making an 8-segment ring. So you have 360, that's 360 degrees in a circle. And we are going to divide that by 2 times the number of segments. So again, 8 segments, 2 times 8 is 16, 360 divided by 16 is 22.5. So we're going to adjust the miter fence. And now most miter fences have a standard stop at 22.5 degrees. So we're going to go ahead and set this at 22.5 degrees. All right, so what we have here is, this was a segmenting jig that I made a while ago. And it was super easy to make. 3 pieces of 3/4 inch MDF laminated together, and that's just for stability purposes. And then I drew out to 12.5 inches, which, thinking about it now, I probably should have made this a little bit larger and drawn out to 13-inch circles, but I did it at every inch. And then I have my 8 lines at 90 degrees to the alternating lines, and wherever the circle met up with one of the longer lines, that's where I drilled the circle, or I drilled a 1/4 inch hole to hold my pegs. So what I do, and this is my wife's favorite thing about me making segmented bowls, is I usually have these the rings splayed all throughout the kitchen as the glue sets. But we're gonna go ahead and take the pieces and get them mildly set around the center. And then I'm gonna take some 1/4 inch dowels, and I'm gonna go ahead and put those in all these holes all the way around. And we're gonna stretch some rubber bands around them. The reason we're stretching the rubber bands around them is, this ring's a little bit too big for my hands alone. So I need some help. Now, the first thing that I want to do is, take these out. First thing I want to do after cutting my ring is to verify. I trust my equipment, but I also want to verify it. And I verify it by stretching out the rubber bands, getting the rings put together, do a dry fit, and then I hold it up to a light source. and I'm checking for light getting through. And for some reason, the number 3 always works for me. But for the dry fit, we're going to use 2 rubber bands. Get the pieces in there. And we're going to start pulling the pegs and getting these pieces up close and personal. All right, so they are set. They are set together. They look good. They look like they're together, but let's have a light right up there. And all I'm doing is just checking for light between the pieces, and I have none. So now we're going to go ahead and do the glue up. And like I said, this is my wife's favorite part of this. But before we do that, this is a trick I learned after a couple rubber bands had popped and the pieces, I had glue covered pieces fly all over my kitchen. Painter's tape. Blue painter's tape, best friend in making these things. So what we're going to do is we're just going to throw, I'm going to tape the ring together. All right, now flip this guy back over. Let's take these rubber bands off. All right, so for today's video, we are going to throw down a couple pieces of wax paper over the jig. And now this is, wax paper is my best friend. And I say wax paper is my best friend because nothing sticks to wax paper and it's cheap. We'll lay the wax paper down. And let's keep it in place. These the pegs, they are available. These were just Rockler brand 1/4 inch by 1.5 inch dowels. So we got our rubber bands and our wax paper down. Now for today's build, I'm using Titebond Quick and Thick. Works really great, sets pretty fast. It only needs about 20 to 30 minutes of clamp time. I've also used Titebond Translucent, Titebond 3. Really any kind of wood glue will work. All right, so Titebond is water soluble, so you'll need if you want, makes cleanup a lot easier. I just use an acid brush and water, and then we'll get everything wiped up with a paper towel after the squeeze out. So now that we've got the ring taped together, we got the rubber bands down, we got the wax paper down, let's start gluing. So with pieces with the ring being this big, we're just going to go ahead and do opposite sides. Right there. It's just a little bit of glue. You don't need a whole lot when putting these together. All right. Now here comes the real fun part. I'm just very carefully trying to go through, because I've had this happen before where I put the rubber bands on and they clamp unevenly, or more pressure gets put on the top side than the bottom, and I end up having to frantically call my wife over to prevent the rings from flying across my kitchen. Which, for all you married folk out there, you know that's never a good day. These guys, we're just going to stick our finger in there, pull it out a little bit, and now if you get a peg that gets a little stuck, don't worry. Just kind of unscrew it, and it'll work its way out. All right, so let's start the cleanup. We're just going to smear it out all over the place first. The water dilutes it, and we're just going to paint it on. And I promise you it'll make sense here in a minute. Rinse the brush. Cutting my rings, I intentionally cut them thicker so that it's a little bit taller than the plan's original ring height. And I do that because I know that I'm going to have some cleanup to do to get everything flat for the final ring. All right, let me grab a paper towel. Just a little bit. Let the glue set. So while it dries, we're gonna go turn the floating bottom. Let the glue set. So while it dries, we're gonna the name Quick and Thick is not deceiving. This shit is thick. All right, now we wait. We'll be back after the glue sets.